Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Well, this whole project began in the mid 90s. I began worship and looked out, and here was a woman that I had never seen before. And she was sitting about halfway back on this side, and she had a mink stole on. And in Bonner, Montana, that stood out. And, and her name was Mimi Malott, come to find out. And Mimi had moved here from San Diego because she could really no longer live on her own. And so she came here to this area to live with her daughter, Fawn Treichel. Fawn and Reuben they live, I don't know if they're still there or not, but as you go up Brickyard Hill into East Missoula, the back of their house faces that road as you go up the hill. Well, Mimi and I got to visiting, and she came very regularly, and by the way, it was the last time I ever saw that mink stole. She she dressed sharply, but Montana style from then on. She learned quickly. And she came every Sunday. And one day she came up to me and she said, pointing to the window, the second one back there, she says, "There's a crack in that window." And they were just plain glass windows before. I mean, you couldn't see through them, but they were kind of an amber and orange color. And she said, "I'm going to have Mary fix that." And Mary was her granddaughter. And Mary owned a shop in Missoula on Front Street. Front or Main? Main. Was it Front? Where's the Union Club? That was kind of across from the Union Club, so it must have been Main, in that block. And she said, Mary has this shop called Glass Act, and she does stained glass. And she knows all about glass. She says, "I'm going to have her repair that window." Fine. Well, for months she kept saying, "I'm going to have Mary repair that window," and nothing got done. And then one morning she came to me, she said, "I'm not going to have Mary repair that window. I'm going to have her make a stained glass window for that window." And I said, "You're going to do what?" It took me back. I thought, what do we do with that? And I talked to her about it. I said, we can't proceed with something like that without talking to the church council. You just don't come in and put in a stained glass window. And so I said, let me talk to the council. And we talked, and we decided finally that, yes, we could have her put a stained glass window in there. We didn't want to get into a program of trying to do all the windows. We didn't have the kind of money that could do something like that because we knew it would take a lot. And we thought, well, if she puts in this window and there's never another one put in, it'll just be like hanging a picture on a wall and it'll be fine. So we said, you can go ahead, but just in case, we're going to draw up a program of what the windows should look like if there are more someday. And so we'll make a theme, and then we'll see where we go from there. So we decided to draw up a theme, and what we came up with, just so I get it right, I'm going to look at my notes here. We decided the triune God, Father, Son, Father Creator, Son, Redeemer, Holy Spirit, Sanctifier. And then the next one was going to be all saints, the people of God, for all the saints. We were going to name each window by a hymn that's in our hymnal. So each of these had a name. So that was to be all saints. The last one was to be music, and we used the hymn, When in Our Music God is Glorified. And that at that time, we had an organ and piano back in that corner, and that's where all the music happened. So that was to be the window down there. Then over here, we said, okay, Word and Sacrament. This will be the Word of God. The next one will be baptism. The next one will be communion. And then from there, we had to go to Morning Cry, which was a hymn that our congregation, and I think every congregation, adores. It's been translated to 50 different languages, and it's in hymnals all over the world. And so God being with us in all stages, Morning Cry talks about birth and death and in between. So that one was to be Morning Cry. And then the last one, we talked about vocation. And we used the hymn, Lord of All Hopelessness, because it talks about the work we do and how we fit into our communities and the things that we are about from day to day. So we went to see Mary Suptic, who was the granddaughter at Glass Act, and she agreed to take on the project. And she, excuse me, she offered us 3 different basic designs, which you can look at these after. She offered us these 3 designs for how the basic windows would be structured. And we put them out and let the congregation vote. And so all the people of the congregation put in their vote, and they chose the ones that you see, and that was this one right here. And it was really kind of nice because it allowed us to also add the dimension of color, the colors of the paraments and the colors of the church year. So we have white. Up at the top there, you'll see it. White and purple and red and blue and green, the 5 liturgical colors. So those were the same on either side of the window, or side of the room. Then we set out to put Mimi's window together. And of course, since she was doing it with her granddaughter, I had very little to do with that. And again, time passed and passed and passed. Didn't hear much about it. And so I thought maybe she had given up on the idea. And because I wasn't real enthusiastic about it, I didn't press her. But then, Oni and Lee Hama, Oni died, and Lee decided she wanted to put up a window because she had heard about the windows. And Ken, one of their sons, who is, I don't know if he still is, because I imagine he's retired by now, but he's a real mover and shaker, and he's one of the vice presidents, or the last I knew, he was one of the vice presidents of the Getty Museum in LA. So he knows what he's doing, and he knows how to get things done. So Lee and Ken came to me and said, we want to put up a window, but we want to dedicate it on or near Oni's birthday. Well, that gave us 6 weeks put up. So I said, let's go talk to Mary and see if it can be done. And so we went and talked to Mary, and she assured us, she said, I've got Grandma's window ready and done. Grandma had died by now, so Grandma never got to see her window, Mimi. But Mary had it done, and she was ready to have it installed. And so we decided that we would install the two windows together for this first event. And Mary said she could get the Hammer window ready too. Well, what we established was that anytime a family was doing a window, we had given this list of suggestions of themes, items that could be used in the window and all, but we would all go to see Mary. I would go with the family, and we'd all sit down together. Mary was wonderful in listening to the family, to get to know them and what they were interested in the window, and a little bit about their history, and then talking about images that could be used. So the Hammas went, and they, because theirs was about the Holy Spirit, they wanted the descending dove on this side, and they wanted the flames flames are on that side, and then the rays coming down, and they wanted it in 6 weeks. And so Mary would listen to the family and then invite the family back in another week, and by then she would have drawings of the window. And then Mary had broad shoulders, so she was very eager to hear what the family thought, and she listened to them again, and she was willing to take criticisms or, say, get rid of this or put this in, and that happened with every single window. So after that, the window was pretty well decided, and so the people left again. But Mary invited the families. If they wanted to come and cut some of the glass, they were welcome to do that. And several families did that, went and cut a few pieces of glass for their window. So the dedication of those first two windows was set for December 17th of the year 2000. Now, each window is housed between two other pieces of glass, which gives it a good thermal quality. And the installer arrived on Friday before that Sunday, December 17th. The snow was falling sideways that day. It was bitter, bitter, bitter cold. And he was out there installing these windows. And that's the way. And he installed both windows. And so in the evening then, I came over just to look at them. And I noticed that the descending dove was taking off. He had installed the window upside down. So I called him that night, or I called Mary, I don't remember which. And on Saturday, he had to come back and reverse the window. And on Saturday, the snow was still flowing sideways, only harder, and it was cold. It was miserable. But he got that window installed in time for Sunday. From then on, I always left arrows and notes and on every window to make sure that it was going the right way. So that was the way that we got things started. Mimi had wanted butterflies in her window. And so this window became appropriate because as we talk about Jesus as about the cross is depicted, the butterflies, the resurrection, and she got her mountains and everything she wanted in it as well. You need to take a look at that second window too, the Pentecost window. It really is lovely, the reds and things of the flames. Well, It wasn't long after that that a young woman from the congregation came up to me. Her name was Connie Fraser, and she said to me, I want to donate a window for my uncle. Well, her uncle was Jim Carroll, and Jim and his wife had moved down from Metlakatla, Alaska, to be here because he had contracted ALS, and he was basically dying. They didn't know how long it would be. And so Jim and Karen moved in with her sister, who also lived here, whose husband was dying of cancer. And the two men used to talk to each other about which do you think of us will die first. But I mean, it was a very healthy kind of gathering for them in these last days. Well, Connie said she wanted to do a window because Jim, on the way home from church, had said, I wonder what the Cross and Crowns window will be like. And I said, well, we didn't really have a Cross and Crowns one, but we have an All Saints one, and that certainly could involve Cross and Crowns. And so Connie and her cousin Jeremiah, who was Jim's son, wrote all the relatives to raise money for the window. And they did it rather quickly. Well, they hadn't said anything to Jim and Karen about the window. And Connie and, well, not Jeremiah, because he didn't live here at the time, or did he? Yeah, I guess maybe. Anyway, we went to see Mary, and we worked the same kind of way to come up with that. And on the right side, there are crowns. One of them is very dark. The other are very bright and celebratory. And then the Alleluia banner on the left. They were here in church, and Jim always sat back in that corner because he was confined to a wheelchair and had a breathing machine, and you could hear the pulse of that breathing machine. And after he died, I recognized, after all this time, I'm going to get teary. I recognized that was part of the music of worship for me, that pulse of his breathing machine that was so audible, and yet no one cared. But anyway, they were seated back there, and a whole lot of the family had come from Idaho to visit for the weekend. But Jim and Karen knew nothing about this. And so I waited to see what was going to happen. We had a bulletin insert, but we didn't put it in the bulletin because we didn't want them to know it until we revealed the window. Because we had these windows covered each time and then had a dramatic pulling of the... thank you, Adrian. That's better. So I watched Jim and Karen's faces when they passed this out, and I saw them look and then do a double take, so I knew they were totally surprised and thrilled. And Jim didn't live very long after that, but at least he got to see his window installed and appreciated. Looking at some of the other windows, I'm going to just tell a little bit about them as I recall. I have made copies of the presentation I gave 10 years ago here, and I'll give anybody who wants one copies, and it may have a more detailed story than what I'm giving you here. But this window here is for God the Father, and the hymn for that one was Immortal, Invisible, God Only Wise. That was put together by two families who had been very close all through the years. The Jorgensen family and the Iverson family. Doris and Leonard Iverson lived up in Potomac. Irma Peterson Jorgensen lived in Hamilton and then moved to Missoula again, and this congregation lost its priest and back out there. So they called me, and Mel and Irma did come back here and worshiped regularly. But anyway, the hand of God come down. The red cabin, uh, they had a cabin up on Lake Inez. It was Mel's pride and joy. Irma tolerated it because she had to do all the work, carting stuff and all that. And the fishing and over on this side, the cattle, I guess it's just one cow, and the bales, and then Leonard's loved fjord horses from Norway. So, and it talks about the darkness they wanted of the clouds, and yet the sun coming down. And so that was that window, and we've already talked about the other three. Coming over here, this one is it's the Handleys gave the window. There were a whole bunch of Handleys, and you can read the plaques yourselves to see what they say. But did I tell you that a week or so after the two windows, I think, no, after Jim's window, the windows were gone. Everybody had called; they were gone, spoken for. Well, Handleys wanted to do this window, but the Snedden family also wanted to do so. The Handleys invited the Sneddens to come and be a part of their window too, so it was a joint effort between them. And this one is about the Word of God. Shows the young man with the lamp walking down the pathway, and the beginning. In the beginning was the Word. Very obvious. The Gladiola, Frida Handley, the matriarch of the family, from the time they first bloomed until the time they quit blooming in the fall, Frida Handley had bouquets of glads on our altar every single week. And so there had to be glads in this window. So that's where those came from. And many in the family were big fishermen, so the guy has a fisherman. This next window is the baptism window, and it was done by two families out of tragedies in their lives. The Norm and Maureen Jacobson family, their daughter died in a tragic incident in Las Vegas, and Don and Ann Halverson, their son died a week after his high school graduation in a car accident down by Lolo. So those two families went together to create a window, and they wanted their window to, of course, represent baptism. And so we have the baptism in the river. And I love our diversity. And the kite is a symbol, and it's in that story I'm going to leave with you. But the card that Don and Ann had, the card, I'm getting all mixed up. Yeah, the card that Don and Ann had given Ben for his high school graduation had this poem called The Kite, about letting your children fly free, and then something about the end and when you have no control and all that. And so that's why the kite. On the other side, Lori was a cheerleader, And so they wanted that represented there. So she has pom-poms, and Ben loved basketball, so he has his basketball in his hand. They wanted an eagle, and talked about the eagle's wings in the scripture. The shell with the water drops, and the cross and the candle. And then the footprints in the sand, talking about where God picks up where we don't do so well. And these two families had experienced the not so well. So that was their window. Then the next window is the communion window. And this was also done by two families who had been close friends for many, many years. They camped together. They did lots of things together. And it was the Miles family, Clarence and Shirley Miles, and then Bob and Jen Clubb. And these two families, Clarence died, I don't have the years in my head right now, and then Jen Clubb died, and eventually Bob and Shirley married. But that wasn't until after the window went in. And it has the wheat, it has the grapes, it has the chalice, it has the bread, and the words, "Do this in remembrance of me." When I was here on Thursday nights in the summer, we had worship service in the evening for those who weren't able to come on Sunday. And I remember standing, because I was usually there facing this way, and as the sun went down, this window just began to sparkle. I don't know what it was about it, but it just shone. So that was the Clubb and Miles. And I should get that right, because after they got married, I would sometimes forget and call Shirley Miles. And I got a talking to from Bob. And this window was initially begun to honor Albin and Pauline Erickson. And this was the Morning Cry window. And so Morning Cry talks about God being with us in all the stages of our lives. So we have a young mother here with her baby. We have teenagers holding hands. We have an old man here with a cane and his wife sitting there. And here's a young man with his kid out fishing. And this is a replica of the first of 3 buildings that this congregation has worshiped in. And the pastor standing there and a young couple getting married. And again, an older person walking up. So trying to portray that. Well, they did half the window, and then the church council decided to honor all the pastors who've served this congregation. And so the other half of the window is to honor all of these pastors that served and have served since the plaque was made, Eric. We should get another plaque and add the names. And this window is for Carl and Mabel Johnson and their parents, Hans and Elizabeth. Lord of all hopefulness, talking about whose hands were strong at the lathe and plane in the lathe, and the workaday world that we're involved in. This is the second building that the church worshipped in. And here is represented the mill with its TP burner and the smoke. And here's a typical Bonner house. Here's a little red wagon. And I imagine that this congregation is the only congregation, I'll go so far to say in the world, to have a pair of red long johns in their church window. So, and the coveralls. You know, in those days, women's work was hanging clothes on the line and all that. And so that is trying to talk about that. The school bus with the very prominent rear view mirror, Carl Johnson, or Bull Johnson as many called him, drove school bus for many, many years. And I can't tell you how many people have told me stories about when they were riding that bus, if they saw Carl Johnson's eyes in that rear view mirror, they straightened up real fast because they knew literally that they would be walking home if they didn't. And he was known to let kids off out in the country and they had to walk a couple miles home. He'd probably be in prison for that today, but he got away with it then. And Carl was he was a delight, a real delight. But he was strong-headed. He told us once that he had his shop out in the garage, and he went out there to work one day. He was mid-90s by then. And he said, I went out there, a stubborn Swede, and I came back a dumb Swede. He had cut off 2 of his fingers. They had warned him against doing it, but he went. Okay, then the last window, which is, it used to be where that door is back by the music, but when the new addition happened, there needed to be an egress there, so it's moved up here and lighted, so it's still very visible and very nice. This window was done by the Tags and the Pataya family, and by a family called Vilnau was their name. We were talking a little earlier. I did George Pataya's funeral the week before I actually started. My first Sunday was to be on a certain date, and I got here a week early or so, and George died, and so I met with the family and did the funeral on Wednesday or Thursday or Sunday that week, and so I did it even before I was real here, before I met the congregation. This was an interesting window, as some of you know, to put together. Chuck and Maggie were in Arizona, right? Mexico. Yeah. The Vilnaus now lived in Wisconsin. And so we were planning a window here. And all the business about people going in and had to be done long distance. So I went in to see Mary, and the other problem was, and it wasn't really a problem, it was just something to be solved. The Vilnaus, and let me tell you the story of the Vilnaus. Brad had been out here for many years, and when he married his sweetheart from Wisconsin, then she came out and she joined him, of course, and they were very active in the congregation. They decided that it was time to move back to Wisconsin because they had had a baby, and they decided there were a whole bunch of cousins for this baby about the same age, and they wanted Jack to grow up with his cousins. And as I was thinking about this the other night, Jack must be 23 years old now. I haven't kept up with them, not lately, but anyway, they went back to Wisconsin, and they hadn't been there but a few months. And Brad was on his way home from work. He was going west and didn't see an approaching car because the sun was in his eyes at 4 or 5 o'clock, and the other car hit him and killed him instantly. So they wanted to do a window to remember Brad. And the Taigs, of course, Charlie and Senya were here forever. And the Patayas were here forever. And so their window was the other part of it. Well, the Vilnaus were thinking about music, the music of nature. You know, all nature sings and round me rings the music of the spheres. The Taigs were thinking of music in the traditional sense, with instruments and keyboards and music notes and all. Both wonderful ideas, but how do you do it? So Mary and I sat with our heads together for a long time, and we decided finally, Becky wanted mountains, she wanted trees, she wanted a river, and she wanted a rainbow, and she wanted a figure on the rainbow, walking down the rainbow. After Brad died, there was a coloring book in his car, and the only picture that had been colored in it, and Brad had done the coloring, showed a father and son walking down the rainbow, and the caption was, Jack and his father go walking merrily along together forever, or something. So that she really wanted there. Well, we were trying to figure out how to do that, and finally I woke up in the night one night and thought, well, we could continue that over into the other side, and it could become the lines of a music clef. So we fired off a picture to Chuck and Maggie, and Chuck, in this file I have all our correspondence back and forth. It was interesting reading it again. But anyway, they made some suggestions. There were no music notes. There was an awkward flute and some other stick that we couldn't tell what it was, and I didn't remember. And so you made the suggestions that we change those to notes, which we did. And I think it turned out to be really a beautiful window. And I think the two go beautifully from one to the next. So each time we had a window dedicated, we had a special bulletin that told a little bit about the story. I've laid all those that I have out here. And this is the drawing that I think I sent to you, and then you made changes, and that's what it became. So you're welcome to take a look at any of this stuff. And so that's kind of where we are. Do you have questions or anything that doesn't make sense? Yes, Eric. Oh, I'm sorry, we aren't done. We had so many people wanting to do windows that we didn't have enough windows. But we had, out in the narthex, we had 4 single panes, and we thought, let's do those too. So I think Levon Otto was the first one to ask for one, and she has one that is, we hadn't selected hymn names, but she chose In the Garden, and it shows a woman seated on the woman, of course, is dressed in blue, because if Levon Otto is anything, she's blue. I'm not her mentality, but she loves blue. So the woman had to be dressed in blue. And she's kind of surveying what goes on. She's sitting in the garden alone and recognizing the beauty of God's creation. Then, who's on this side? Oh yeah, Bert Caldwell. Bert and Mitzi were a couple that they lived in Anaconda, and they moved over here for their retirement because their son was fire chief over here. And they were delightful folks. And Mitzi, she lost some of her ability to remember things and all, and Burton took such good care of her, and they were such a delight. And so when she died, I think, well, what year was? Yeah, Bert was still alive, so he was the one that did the window. And he chose the Lord's my shepherd, I'll not want. So that window tells that story, and it kind of moves from darkness to light, and it has a waterfall that comes down into the lightness. And then I think it's on the opposite end is Dwight and Amy Gappert. And if you've ever known Dwight and Amy Gappert, they're animal people. To walk in their living room up in Potomac, it's like a jungle in there. Stuffed animals from the walls and in cases and all over the place. And so of course they wanted to do all things bright and beautiful and highlight the animals. And Amy, she doesn't understand, or we don't understand, that horses aren't people. She's quite a horse person, and she knows any and everything. Even if you think differently, she still has the final answer on it. She and who was it? She and another woman from the congregation rode to an assembly with me, and she made some comment, and the other woman disagreed with her. And the two got into a real battle about who was right about it. But Amy really, she could do anything with horses and dogs, and she was quite something. And she was also one who hated to live where she could see a neighbor. And they lived out in the boonies, all out of Potomac, and someone dared to build a house that she could see. So she was ready to move someplace else. But that window depicts all the animals and that. And then the last window out there is the Perrys did it, and it's about the children. Eric would know more than I, because I was gone by the time that window.
Yeah, so that window, which is the second one, and you all who are here in person, you can take a look at it on your way out, but it's the second one on the left. And Court and Lydia Perry were really inspired by the work that Carl had done and the congregation and all the windows that were here. And so they wanted to do something because Court and Lydia were foster parents for a long time, and then actually eventually adopted. And so Jesus welcoming the children was incredibly important for them and their family. And so they got in contact with another artist who tried to replicate the themes and the design that was in this window, and came up with Jesus being welcoming children of all stripes and colors. And so there's quite a diversity of children who are around and sitting on Jesus' lap and being a part of that. And so it's really special for them to have dedicated. We dedicated that window about 4 years ago. So,
thanks. Yes. That was a difficult one to come up with, because now I could come up with several, but we used the hymn in the hymnal, "When in our music God is glorified." It's a hymn that's not often sung because it's a little bit difficult to sing, but the words are terrific, and I'm sure you'd find it in this hymnal. I'll look it up after and we'll see. But that was the official hymn name that we had on our list. And these things that I'm giving you, the last page has every this is the original document that the council drew up. So it tells which hymn names go with which window. And they are listed in the order of how they appear in the church too. Anybody else? Well, thank you for coming and for asking me to do it, because as I say, the other night when I was looking through this file and reading all of it, it just flooded back all kinds of things. I've been gone from here 17 years now, and this old mind doesn't remember things like it did. Although I think I was telling Eric before, the other night I was laying in bed not able to sleep, and I came across, I started thinking about what to say, and I came up with names. I thought, how do I remember that name? I amazed myself, but I thought, oh, it's too bad I couldn't have just recorded this and sent it. Because I'll get up here and forget stuff, but. Okay, I will put these on this table also, and you're welcome to take one of these and have a look at whatever you see there. Yes, Adrian.
Well, that window there came from where the door was, and it spent a little bit of time in the garage, and we weren't sure what to do with it. And so we built a light box for it. But there has been some debate about splitting it and putting one half on each side of the stone. And I don't know, I think it would change. After listening to this, I'm not sure that would be appropriate.
It would take away the flow from my perspective, that the rainbow becomes the staff of music. So my vote is no.
Okay.
Yeah, buy another, that's another place to put another window. Good idea. And you could cut a hole in the wall, although the south sun would be, oh yeah, it'd be beautiful for the window, but it'd be terribly warming in the summer. But no, I hope you don't do that. But
But I think we would like to get it to where sunlight comes through it.
yeah, that'd be nice. But this is nice too. I mean, I'm glad you lighted it. Anything else? Well, thank you all for coming, and have a look and enjoy your stay.